Hello. So I'm Nora, as I've just been introduced, and I'm a biologist, and I study something that not too many people study. I study tits. Well, to be a little bit more specific, I study the responses of highly aroused tits. Now, you might be asking yourself, why would you want to study tits? Well, there are a number of reasons. First of all, I love tits. I mean, come on. They're just so round, and they bounce around, and they're so adorable. Who wouldn't want to study tits? I mean, really. Scientifically speaking, there are also a number of reasons to study tits. The first one being that they're very common. You see them everywhere. Right? You know, outside, everywhere. And so this is kind of both a blessing and a curse for a field biologist, because it means that I don't necessarily get to travel to truly exotic places, but it does mean that I get to meet all sorts of really cool people. So I actually studied tits in Fife and many in St. Andrews. And so I actually have this really cool network of people who've allowed me to come and use their gardens to just sit there and stare at their tits. It's great, and they get really excited about it. They send me messages like, oh yeah, my tits are doing great. There's some new tits in the neighborhood. You might be able to study those too. It's very exciting, very exciting. So the other great thing about tits is that they come in a wide variety of sizes and shapes, which is good because I really want to study the variation, the whole variation. And so, of course, the most important thing is the fact that they have very specific responses when they're highly aroused. Now, these responses include everything from increasing in size, which is, let me tell you, quite astounding to see. They get, a little agitated, they bounce around a lot more. And they can get just a wee bit aggressive, all up in your face. It's a little intimidating, actually. So now, of course, since I'm studying this particular type of behavior, goodbye lights, it's a whole range of so to study this specific type of behavior, obviously we have to get the tits into a state of high arousal. Now, to do this, I use stimuli. Now, the stimuli that I use are special because they move. Now, these are not ordinary stimuli. I crafted these stimuli myself, and I'm quite proud of them, I will say. I had to learn a little bit of computer programming and robotics in order to make sure that the head moved at the frequency and the correct amount of power in order to not just get the tits into a high state of arousal, but to sustain this arousal. Now, the really kind of, the thing that many people kind of, is a little counterintuitive about these particular stimuli, is that size really does matter quite a bit. But in this case, the smaller the stimuli, the more effective. This is true because smaller stimuli are much more dexterous. They respond quicker, and are just generally very efficient and effective. Bigger stimuli, a little clumsy, to tell you the truth. Just can't really quite respond very quickly. It's not very effective. So now there has been some confusion in the past, so I may point out that I do study birds. This would be great coal and blue tits, and my stimuli are different types of predators. So you have small predators that are very agile, like sparrowhawks, that can catch things like small tits very, very easily, versus something very large like a buzzard, which would be a little bit like a cruise ship trying to catch a speedboat. Not very efficient. So, oh goodness. So, of course, I need to use these different types of stimuli to get this really high arousal response. Now, the high arousal response is basically a fear response, where tits get very agitated and they actually will harass and sometimes even attack predators in order to drive them out of an area. And they'll produce a lot of very fascinating noises. And so they have special kinds of calls that they call mobbing calls, and they put lots of information in these calls. And I study the information. So I study how different tits put information in their calls about how threatening a predator is. So to do this, we have to have different stimuli. Now, robotic birds do not grow on trees. They may perch on trees, but they don't grow on trees. And I knew coming here that I was going to be doing these types of experiments. And instead of doing the really expensive version of finding a dead bird and then having somebody taxidermy it into a robot, me and my advisor thought, let's just get some taxidermy birds off eBay and roboticize those. So, lo and behold, 2 weeks after I arrived in St. Andrews, there I am in my advisor's office with a taxidermy partridge on the desk. My task, removing the head without destroying the body. And of course, being the lonely, sad, new person I was, I had my office door open, and of course across the hall there was another huge office of PhD students while I commenced the delicate operation with the man tool, as my mother calls it, in one hand, and the partridge before me on the desk. I began the delicate procedure of hacking the head off of the partridge. And for some reason, there was just, people were really busy that day, just walking back and forth and back and forth. And you would think that removing the head of a partridge, easy peasy, quick as pot. No. Sucker took like 20, 30 minutes to come off. Lots of cussing, lots of throwing things. It was kind of an event. And so, of course, after I successfully removed the head, feeling, so excited that I kept the body intact, the head was intact, it sort of fit back together correctly. Then I realized we hadn't decided how to put the head back onto the body yet. So the partridge sat, headless, on my desk for 3 months. Which is why, for those 3 months and beyond, I'd be introduced to people and say, the history department, and they'd be like, oh, you're that headless bird girl, aren't you? I'd be like, yes I am. My office mates even took to playing hide the head from Nora, which is why I then locked it in my desk. So yes, we now have a menagerie. We have 3 robotic raptors, 5 more on the way. Very exciting. Someday I may even try to take over the world. But yeah, so it's always very exciting when I introduce myself. I'm the headless bird girl. I study tits using battery-powered stimuli to get them into a state of high arousal so I can record the sounds they make. As you can imagine, there's usually just a wee bit of awkward silence after I introduce myself.